So one of the things that you keeps coming back to is giving people the tools, whether that be managers or whether that's an internal
Yeah.
team, but also giving them the skills. So we've talked about it in terms of the interview, in terms of finding the talent, but you've also talked about all of those other benefits of being as part of an organisation. So how can care organisations better support their managers to create that positive, engaged workforce that means we're not going to need to rely on recruitment as much because we're keeping people within the business?
It's that I relies heavily on how you train them, how you develop them, and how much confidence you instill in them from either the get-go, or if you've got long-serving managers and you're just looking at a bit of a strategic overhaul, it's about having space and time for the managers. So many reasons for managers leaving their company is, oh well, it was just too much. There was too much expected of me, and if anything went wrong, I had no support. And I'd only ever speak to my leadership team, my ops director or whatever, when we were at crisis point, and I couldn't cope anymore. Or they'll be crying out for staff and there's no budget, they're not told what they can do, they don't know what their remit is, so they struggle along and the rest of the staff team get overworked. And ultimately it's lack of support and understanding from that leadership team. So it's about, when you're hiring a manager or promoting a deputy up, or you've got an existing manager, it's those regular check-ins to see what's working well, what's not working well, where can we support you, how can we support you better, and is there a training gap there? Have a look. Is this manager really good with people, but their quality isn't quite where it needs to be? Rather than that escalating into an absolute whirlwind of chaos and the home or service going into a bad CQC rating for whatever reason, harness that quickly and look and say, right, this manager needs some training and development in quality assurance, compliance, and look at it that way. You might identify a really strong deputy manager. I would encourage any employer to jump on that employee sooner rather than later and start talking to them about, have you ever considered doing your level 4, level 5? How would you feel if we put you forward for that and you started it? Because you're not only giving them that kind of praise that we've recognized you're really good at something, you're kind of guaranteeing their employment for another however long that training's going to be, and your succession planning for your own business should another managerial position come up. So as an ops director or a regional manager, you should, I know there's a lot to do with the social care, and this is kind of, someone's probably going to sit there thinking, oh, because we've all got time for that. But believe me, if you kind of make time once a month for a one-to-one and a catch-up and a check-in with your direct reports on, yes, the operational side of the business, but also their emotional well-being, their personal development, it will aid your retention 100%, as long as whatever outcomes come from that one-to-one are actioned, if they're reasonable actions. So yeah, there's a lot to be said about checking in and actioning what will motivate your employees.
Yeah, and I mean that goes cross sector, doesn't it? We can say that about any sector because there's if you look at the Gallup workforce report for last year, there's some fascinating statistics in terms of engagement. But one of the key themes that comes out of there is how performance management is used. Now, as soon as you say that phrase, people go to the negative and performance management is how to get rid of people. Actually, what we should be talking about, or what we talk about, is performance management as a positive culture, because actually it is those check-ins, it is making sure that everybody's got that personal development plan and is on that journey, and it's keeping those communication lines open, and making sure we're using it as time to make sure they've got everything they need and that their well-being is right, because as you say, we all have ups and downs, don't we? We're not in the age where leave work at home. leave what leave home at the door when you get to work. It just doesn't work like that.
No,
And people talk about work-life balance, work-life blend. You can talk about it however you want to, but ultimately, if we're not giving people the space they need, and that goes for any level, managers or what have you, then we are going to lose those people. So we've definitely got to train people, and that's the other thing. Not having time for training, we hear that all of the time. But if we look at the difference between an apprenticeship or gaining the qualification, in the apprenticeship, you're utilising that to make a difference in the workplace. So actually, the work that you are doing is contributing to that learning, and vice
it
versa.
is work-based learning.
So
you're not being taken off the job.
Part of part of your job, rather than thinking about it of, I've got to do this and I've got to do this, because they're so incredibly intertwined. Ultimately, as you say, succession planning, moving the business forwards in terms of strategy, it can help all of those things. Okay.
And in addition to the formal qualifications, it's give it almost like a toolkit, a managerial toolkit, so that yes, your regional managers they follow the same process with their managers, but then the managers within the services are following that same process with their direct reports, your care and support staff, so that you're maintaining that retention at all levels. So formal training development and robust internal toolkits, so everyone knows their remit, everyone knows what they can and what they should or shouldn't be doing. It can sound like a big ask, but it's a small change that really does add value long term.
And that retention, when we look at, if you look at the skills for care reports and how many vacancies and how many more staff we're going to need in the care sector by 2030, we've talked about vacancy numbers now, but we're going to add 300,000 more jobs that we're going to need to fill. So we can't afford to be losing people at the rate we are if we're going to move forward into that. There's some really key bits there. So thank you for that. It's incredibly important. And how often do we see that people are promoted into the next level before we've given them the training, because they've been there the longest, or because they have demonstrated incredible skills in that? Not saying they don't rightly deserve a promotion, but as organisations, we need to be looking at preparing those people before they move into that role. So actually the transition is much easier. And again, that retention.
And they feel more confident when they step up into that role. And therefore they've already got that confidence that actually, I'm ready for this, because they've lived it on the training beforehand. So absolutely. And even the amount of candidates that I see leaving the deputy manager positions to go elsewhere, and their reason being is, because I want to progress to management, but my company won't support my level 4, my level 5. And I just think it's such a sad state of affairs. I mean, the salesperson in me is then thinking, well, let me speak to that employer when they leave to talk about how they can work on their retention and attraction. But as a recruiter who's been in social care for so long, it's kind of like, it's almost frustrating, because you think you've got someone here who's desperate for it, unless there's a legitimate reason and they're abysmal at their job. But that's not often the case. Often the case is someone's been at deputy manager level for 2-3 years at the same company. They're leading a really strong workforce. There's no other issues in the home, yet they feel held back, so they leave. And it's such a loss to that business, but it's a gain to someone else who's then going to support their career development.
And even if you look at it so black and white as the cost. So if you think about how much it costs to train somebody and how much it costs to recruit somebody, if you're making sure you're training that person, you're never gonna, you're not gonna have that recruitment cost. And actually, you're gonna need to spend less on that training and development than you will to recruit new candidates, train people into that role. You think about a whole period of a new individual coming into an organisation. There's a huge cost to doing that. So, even if you go as simple as that,
the recruitment fee, it's the time that position is vacant, who's having to step up, what's being neglected during that period, because if someone's stepping up, that leaves another gap below them, and it's the time taken to interview and this, that, and the other. I mean, I know I'm talking myself out of a situation here, but it's true. As a recruiter, the best scenarios are when you're recruiting for growth and you're not having to recruit for a replacement, because that's the dream. The company's growing, it's doing well, it's got a really stable workforce. We need a new head because of X, Y, and Z. Fantastic. when it's a replacement, you're up against it, because yes, this client's going to have a fee, but equally what I don't want them to have is a 4 or 5 or 6 week period whereby there's no one doing that job, because what on earth is going to go wrong in that time, because there's so much. So yeah,
ultimately it comes down to what's best for the sector, and ultimately we're all here for the end user, the service users of whether it's adult care, childcare, wherever it's at. Ultimately this all impacts the service we can provide to the people who matter. So whilst you're doing a really good job of convincing yourself out of work, as you say, there's still plenty, because if we are doing all of these things, growth is going to come, and quite naturally,
exactly.
because you're going to want more people coming to use the service because they can feel the culture. You're going to want more people coming to work for you because they can see what you're delivering. So it's really important. But these are the conversations we're having internally, and so
it is.
We need to get them out there.
And these conversations I'm having with my clients, isn't it? Anyone in recruitment will tell you now that the market's tough. Outside of social care, I know there's other areas that are struggling, but obviously I've lived and breathed this for so long. So now the conversations are shifting, and it's, well, how can we stabilize the workforce so that this doesn't happen? Or is there a flight risk? And we're looking at who that flight risk is, and trying to rescue it before it happens. So looking at the training options, looking at what the process is internally to make sure that person doesn't go. And this is where we can add value on that front as well. It's not just about filling vacancies. It's trying to stabilize the sector.
It comes down to all of the individual needs of both businesses and colleagues within those businesses, doesn't it? There's that famous Richard Branson quote, isn't it? That train them well enough so they can leave, but treat them well enough so they don't want to. If we look at it like that, it's it comes down to a very simple premise.